The smell reached me before anything else. It was the smell of dry earth baking under a sun that had no mercy left in it, mixed with something sharper. The acrid, unmistakable scent of those who had been following me for 3 days now. I lay on my side against the base of a termite mound, my ribs pressing into the cracked soil with every shallow breath I managed to pull in. The wound on my left flank had stopped bleeding sometime in the night, but the flesh around it had gone hot and tight. The kind of heat that tells you the body is no longer fighting to heal, only to endure. I had been the one they feared once. I could still remember what that felt like, the way the grass would part ahead of me, the birds would go silent, and the whole savanna would hold its breath as I passed through it. That was another life, a version of me that no longer existed anywhere except in the fading memory of this worn-out body. My mane, which had once been thick and dark as storm clouds, hung loose and matted against my neck. My eyes scanned the golden distance where the shadows were beginning to move. Not the honest movement of wind through grass, but the other kind. The kind that comes with teeth. I heard them before I saw them clearly. That sound they make, not quite a laugh, not quite a bark, something in between that lands in your chest like a cold stone, told me there were many of them, more than I could count in the state I was in. What I noticed was not their numbers, but the way they moved, slowly, deliberately, the way something moves when it knows it has already won and simply wants to savor the last few steps. They spread out in a wide arc across the plain in front of me, each one keeping a careful distance from the others, still cautious, still remembering perhaps what I used to be. I pulled myself upright. I do not know where that came from. Some reflex buried so deep in my muscle and bone that it did not ask permission from my pain. My legs trembled beneath me, and the effort sent a dark wave through my vision. But I did not fall, because standing was the only answer I had left to give them. The sun was low and orange behind me, and I felt its warmth on my back like a hand pressing gently, as if the earth itself were asking me quietly to rest. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the closest shape circling at the edge of my world, and I breathed one slow breath, then another. There is a particular kind of silence that comes when something is about to end. I had witnessed it many times before, standing over prey in the heat of the afternoon, and I recognized it now from the other side, the way the air goes very still, the way even the insects seem to pause, the whole savanna holding its breath around me. I had surrendered in my heart before they ever arrived. I want to be honest about that. But my body had not yet received the message, and so I stood there in the last of the daylight, trembling and bleeding and refusing, in the only language I had left, to lie down. The first one came closer than the others, a large female with a torn ear and pale, calculating eyes that caught the last light of the sun like two pieces of dirty glass. She did not rush. She moved with the slow confidence of someone who has learned that patience is a sharper weapon than speed. I turned my head toward her, and the movement cost me more than I expected. A deep pull of pain that traveled from my wounded flank, up through my spine, and settled behind my eyes. I held her gaze anyway, because looking away was something I was not prepared to do. Not yet. Not while I was still standing. The others tightened the arc around me in response to her advance, each of them reading the situation the way their kind always does, calculating odds, measuring distances, waiting for the moment when the risk drops low enough to feel safe. There were at least a dozen of them now, perhaps more beyond the edge of my vision, and the sound they made was constant and low, a vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself, rather than from their throats. I let out a sound of my own. Not a roar. I did not have a roar left in me, but something rougher and deeper, a warning dragged up from the bottom of whatever I still had. It made the nearest ones flinch and step back by a few lengths, and that small retreat, that one small involuntary retreat, felt like the most important thing that had happened to me in days. But they came back. They always came back. That is the terrible intelligence of their patience. They understand that a warning with no force behind it is only a sound, and sounds fade. The torn-eared female settled onto her haunches less than 20 lengths from me, and simply watched, her jaw hanging slightly open, her breathing slow, and even she was in no hurry. She could afford not to be, and we both knew it, and the knowing of it sat between us like a stone in still water. My legs were shaking badly now. I could feel each tremor travel upward through my body, and I understood with a quiet, almost peaceful clarity that this was the body's last negotiation with gravity, a conversation that was nearly finished. I shifted my weight and felt the ground tilt beneath me in a way that the ground does not actually tilt, and I corrected. And I held. What I felt in that moment was not fear. I want to make that clear, because fear had burned itself out somewhere in the previous days, along with everything else. What I felt was something closer to exhaustion so complete, it had become its own kind of stillness, a silence at the center of all the noise those creatures were making around me. I thought, in a strange and distant way, of the plains I had walked when my legs were young and certain beneath me. I thought of the weight of a different kind of night. The cool, wide darkness before a hunt, when the whole world smelled like possibility. Those thoughts did not make me sad. They arrived softly, like something the wind carried through, and they left the same way. The circle was nearly complete now. The space between each of them had closed to the point where I could see the individual markings on their coats, the specific hunger in each pair of eyes. 1 second passed, then a third, and I stood in the center of it all. Still breathing, still present, waiting for whatever the savanna had decided would come next. I felt it before I heard it, a vibration that came up through the soles of my paws and into my bones, not the trembling of my own failing body, but something from outside, something vast and deliberate moving through the earth toward us from a direction I could not immediately name. The torn-eared female felt it too. I watched her head snap to the left, her ears flattening, her body going rigid in the way that animals go rigid when instinct overrides intention. The laughter around me stopped. Every single voice went silent at once, and the silence that replaced it was a different kind entirely from the one I had known moments before. This one had weight and direction. I turned my head slowly toward the north, where the grass was tall and the light was dying in long orange ribbons across the plain. At first, there was nothing I could identify clearly. Just a darkness at the edge of the world, a mass of shapes that seemed to belong to the horizon itself. Then the darkness moved, and I understood what I was seeing. The buffalo came out of the fading light like something the savanna had been holding in reserve. There were hundreds of them, a wall of horn and muscle and breath that shook the ground beneath them as they came, their hooves striking the earth in a rhythm that was not frantic, but purposeful, the way a tide moves, with the complete indifference of something that has already decided. I do not know how long they had been watching from that distance. I do not know what moved through the mind of the one who led them, or whether there was a decision at all in the way we understand decisions, a moment of choice, a turning point. What I know is that they came and they came toward me, and the hyenas understood before I fully did what that meant for all of us. The circle broke apart. The torn-eared female was the first to run, and when she ran without looking back, without the calculated retreat of an animal that expects to return. She ran the way things run when they are suddenly, completely afraid, and the rest of them scattered after her in every direction, their voices rising in short, desperate bursts before disappearing into the grass. The buffalo did not stop when the hyenas fled. They came all the way to the edge of where I stood, the sound of them filling every part of the air around me, the heat of their bodies reaching me like a wave. The closest ones slowed as they approached, their dark eyes finding me in the last of the light, enormous and calm and ancient-looking, the way the oldest things always look. They formed a loose ring around me, not tight like the hyena's ring, not calculated or closing, but wide and unhurried the way water gathers in a low place without forcing anything. I stood inside that circle and felt the trembling in my legs begin very slowly to ease. Not because anything in my body had healed, but because something in the air had changed, something that my body recognized even if my mind could not yet put words to it. One of the buffalo, a great old bull with a brow so heavy it seemed carved from dark stone, stood perhaps 10 lengths from me and breathed. He did not look away. He did not make a sound. He simply stood in the falling dark and looked at me the way one very old thing looks at another across all the distance of everything that separates their two kinds, and stayed. The buffalo stayed until the stars came out. I cannot tell you exactly when they began to drift away. It happened the way the best things happen, gradually and without announcement, each one stepping back into the dark grass with a quiet that felt almost ceremonial, until only the old bull remained, and then, after a long time, he too was gone. I lowered myself to the ground then, not because I had decided to, but because my body had been waiting for permission, and somehow the stillness that followed their departure was permission enough. The earth came up to meet me slowly, and the pain of it was enormous, and I let it be enormous because there was nothing left to prove to anyone. The night settled over the plain the way nights have always settled here, completely, without apology, wrapping everything in the same darkness without caring what it covers. Above me, the sky was enormous and indifferent and full of light from 1,000 directions at once, the way it always is out here, where there are no walls to hide it. I thought about what had happened, or I tried to, though thinking had become a slow and imprecise thing by then, like trying to hold water in an open paw. The buffalo had not come to save me. I want to be clear about that, because I think it would be dishonest to call it rescue in the way that word is usually meant. They had come because something in them had responded to something in the situation. Some ancient, wordless code that moves between creatures who have shared the same ground for longer than memory can reach. I have spent my life as a predator, and the buffalo have spent theirs knowing exactly what that means. There is no friendship in that history, no warmth, no debt owed between us. And yet, when the moment came, they moved. That is the part I keep returning to in the slow drift of that night. Not the why of it, which I will never fully understand, but the simple, enormous fact of it. There is something that lives in this land older than any one of us, older than the names we might give to it. It does not favor the strong, or the fast, or the clever. It does not keep score. But sometimes, rarely in the moments when everything has been stripped away, and what remains is only the bare fact of a living thing, still breathing against the odds, sometimes it moves through the creatures of this place like a current, and they move with it without knowing why. I lay on the cooling earth and breathed the night air, which smelled of dust and dry grass and something faintly green carried in from far away. My wounds still burned with that deep, patient heat. My legs had stopped trembling only because they had stopped feeling much of anything at all. None of that felt like tragedy from where I lay. What I felt, in the quiet that the buffalo left behind them, was something I had not expected to feel again, a sense of having been witnessed, seen by something that had no reason to look, and that looked anyway, and that chose, in its own wordless way, to stand beside what it saw. That is not a small thing. In the end, I'm not sure there is a larger one.